Fish, thanks for being here, man. Appreciate it. What's going on, dude? How you feeling tonight?
Man, I'm excited to be here. Little stressed. I've been running from one project to the next all day long, but I just got off a meeting with my publisher. But yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm excited to talk comics and stuff, man.
Okay, good deal. So yeah, a little background. You're a comic book illustrator, writer.
Indeed.
How did all this start about or come about here?
Oh, man.
Little kid
It's a
comic books, that normal story.
it's a crazy story. I mean, like I've always loved comics. I've always loved cartoons and superheroes and stuff. I've always been a storyteller at heart. So like comic books was a natural mix of storytelling and my artistic ability. Uh, I became an artist of the strangest ways. Like people always say it was a God given gift now when they see me draw. And admittedly, I was like the best artist in kindergarten, but that means I could draw like the best dragster out of a triangle and two circles. Like it wasn't that complicated.
Okay.
But when the Goonies hit, I absolutely fell in love with Data, with the jacket and all the gear that came out of it. I wanted to be him so bad. I wanted to be an inventor as it was. And this kid built this awesome jacket. And I wanted to build it with the glove that punches out and the grappling hook, little chattering teeth and the oil slick and the whole 9 yards. So I wanted to be him. So my mom smartly, wisely decided she was not going to take me to the junkyard to buy parts for my jacket I wanted to build unless I had detailed plans.
Sure.
Because she knew I would drag home everything that I thought was cool. Mom, look, it's an old radiator. It's awesome. I'll use it for something. I promise. My room would be so full of junk. So because I had to start drawing out these plans and the plans kept changing. And then I got into Inspector Gadget and I figured, if I put a lawnmower motor on a football helmet with some blades on it, I'll be able to fly. Like that won't twist my head off.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, exactly. And so it evolved into that, and then it started evolving into like Iron Man suits of armor, and I'm sure I could figure out how to make jets that would turn around my legs and let me fly out of tin cans and stuff. I mean, surely, if Jet Propulsion Labs can do it, I can do it. And it kept getting more outlandish until like I was just spending all my time designing all this weird, crazy stuff that fit better in the world of comic books than actually trying to get it done. Sure. And, and then I transitioned over to being an artist. But it's weird. I actually got to meet the guy that played Data from the Goonies at a convention a couple of years ago. And man, I took him like one of my first comics I did on my own. I was like, man, I owe you my career. Thank you for the inspiration. I didn't cry. I very closely almost cried, but I did not cry.
But were you a little starstruck at first when you met him, or?
I was just kind of honored. Like I've met a lot of other people at these cons, like while I'm sitting there and they're sitting there. Like every once in a while you get tabled next to some pretty cool people.
Sure.
And and I've never really been starstruck before. I've never really there's very few people I would pay to get their signature. I just don't care that much. If I could pay to say get a burger with like Bruce Campbell or something, like that would be fun. There's a couple of stars that I'd like to just sit down and share a meal with.
Yeah.
I'm not going to stand in line to pay for a signature, but he was one that really meant a lot to me as a kid. And so it was cool to be able to thank him for inspiring me on a career. And I've been working in art like since high school. And I did some of my first jobs that weren't for kids straight out of high school for like local businesses and stuff, designing new letterheads and logos and stuff. And it's been my job in some form or another ever since. And so, it was cool.
So going back a little bit, you said you were a storyteller at heart. I mean, were you just one of those kids who just started, telling stories about whatever was happening that day and just whoever?
Man, I was a liar. I was a liar. I did not know you could just tell stories. I did not know you could be like, hey, imagine if there was a world where this happened. I didn't know you could do that. Like, I didn't know how it got from an idea to like, an episode of Scooby-Doo. I didn't know that like somebody wrote that. So I'd get all these ideas and then I would just lie and tell people like, yeah, I met an old man on the way home from school and he taught me how to carve pecan shells into likenesses of people. And I got abducted by aliens one time. And like, I would just like make up stories and get in trouble for lying. I didn't know that like you could write them down or something, but I was a kid, you got to figure it out somehow.
Learn from your mistakes, man.
It was actually an episode of Scooby-Doo that blew my mind, because in one of the episodes, and it's one of the later episodes, it's like just like Daphne and Shaggy and Scrappy and stuff. But there was a comic book illustrator that was like being haunted by like the ghost of his character. Like his character would show up and do terrible things and whatever. And that's when I realized that somebody actually does this. Like somebody actually sits in a room and comes up with these stories and draws them. And that's a job. And he has an office, and like, I could do something like that. And that blew my mind. I did not know that you could like actually make a living doing this before that. And man, I started chasing it. I started chasing it hard. And I had a lot of close calls like after college and stuff. I came real close to getting jobs at big video game companies, that have gone on to make amazing games, interviewed with some great teams, got some job offers from some like real small indie press comic book places that fell through. And I ended up just having to make ends meet for years doing t-shirts and signs and, whatever graphics work you could find around here. I've done custom airbrushing on cars and stuff. I have made like giant chili dogs that go outside of restaurants. I built 40 fiberglass polar bears that went into the Dixie Cafe for their little soda fountain areas. And they said, make them really cool so kids will climb on them. And I made it really cool so kids would climb on it. And a kid climbed on it and chipped his tooth, and then they ripped them all out.
Oh, shit. Oh, shit.
I still got paid, but, hey.
So when you're designing all this, I mean, does it come from like you start with a pen and paper first and got kind of exit out on there, and then do you just transfer it over to like, do you do Adobe Photoshop? I know you just said you airbrush on a car, but I mean, I've never know how
I used to do everything by hand, and I built skill sets and stuff that just doesn't exist anymore. Like, hand lettering and stuff that people don't do anymore, like hand pinstriping that very few people do anymore. Ooh. And now it's like, it's a cool, tricky trend to watch on like TikTok or something. And it's amazing to watch somebody that's good at it,
Oh yeah.
I learned all these skills. Like I used to could do like a 16-foot long laser straight pinstripe, on signs and stuff. Cause a lot of the signs we do would have little lines around the outside and stuff. I got really good at doing that stuff. And then my mystery illness I had my whole life kept getting worse and worse. And we couldn't figure out what it was. And it wasn't until I was 30 and I was on crutches and I was shaking violently, constantly, all of the time, that I finally went to a new neurologist and realized that I had Tourette syndrome my whole life. And didn't find out till I was 30. And by this time, like it had stuck me in a wheelchair. And I spent like the better part of 15 years either in a wheelchair, my bed, or this recliner. And I mean, most of the time I couldn't walk, talk, or see. And my kids are fluent in grunt because they grew up with me being like, I need help. Like that was as clear as I could talk a lot of the days. Right. And there was a lot of times my only contact with the outside world would be one thumb that worked that could control my phone and, message on my phone, and one eye that would be open about half of the time. And I would spend that time in that little portal I had with my phone, and I would spend all day on Facebook and stuff. advocating for people with Tourette syndrome and trying to encourage people and uplift them, and counseling with new parents whose kids just got diagnosed and they're like, oh no, is this life over? Are they ever going to be married or have kids or have a life? And I'm like, yeah, they can do anything they want to do. I mean, like, sure, there are a small handful of us that get really severe like mine did. And I've got a few friends because, like, we fall in the same club. So I've got a lot of friends, that are adults that are as severe as me. But, most people get a lot better at dealing with it as they grow up, and it becomes much less of an issue. And I've met all kinds of people, with severe Tourette's that have started their own businesses like I did. And, because I can't stand for long periods of time. I can't walk a long way without, the more I exert myself, the more I tick and the more I start to shake and the harder it is to talk and see. And so I have to kind of balance out how I do things. And, I can't necessarily drive to work every day, and it's hard to find a job where you tell your boss, like, yeah, maybe I can come in tomorrow. Maybe I can't come in for 2 weeks. Maybe I can talk on the phone. Maybe I can't. Maybe I can see today. Maybe I can't. That's a tough sell for an employer for a 40-hour a week job. Yeah. But I managed to, as I got, I suffered for a long time. We changed some meds. I learned how to like surf the waves of the Tourette's better than just standing in the ocean trying to fight against the waves. And that got a lot easier. And I learned to like let the tics flow through rather than fight them and let the tension build up and get worse and make me tick a whole lot more. And, I learned things like, I had to eat regularly because sometimes I get busy and I forget to eat and, I get distracted. I got to remember to get enough sleep and exercise and take care of myself. All these things together with med changes and some different treatments helped get my Tourette's better. It's not gone. It's still something I deal with every day, but it was good enough that I could look at starting to do some work. And I tried finding jobs, but again, it's hard to find somebody that's like, yeah, you can come in when you can come in. Yeah. And so the easier route was looking for freelance work. And that's how, like, in my 40s, I ended up getting started again from scratch. I had to build a freelance career. What am I going to do? Am I going to go back into signs and logos and stuff? And admittedly, logos pays a whole lot better than comic books do. I used to make per hour designing logos for people what I make per day doing comic books.
Really?
But the stress is so much better. Like working with in comic books, I'm always working with clients that have hired artists before. They know what they're doing almost 90% of the time. They know how to write a clear script. They know what to expect from an artist. If they have a problem, they know how to state that clearly and say, okay, in panel 3 on page 10, I need you to change him, have him look in the other direction, or you missed the belt on his costume, or whatever it is. And when you're working in logos and stuff, you're almost always working with somebody who's never commissioned an artist before. They have never worked on something like this before. They don't really know what they want, but they know they want it to be awesome. And they're getting all this like side influence from people around them. And I spent so much time just going through the process of like, okay, this is how it's going to work. This is when I'm going to show you a sketch. You're going to pick which one of these sketches you like. I'm going to get that to nearly completed. And then you're going to make any revisions you want to make. We're going to change anything you want to change right here. And after that, I'm going to finalize it. I'm going to make it in 100 different file formats for you. So you've got it in any format you will ever need for the rest of your life. And then, I'm going to send you all these files and we'll be done. And then we get to that point and I make you hundreds of files in the way you agreed to it. And then you come back, well, I showed it to my brother and he thinks it's a little too big. So can we like kind of slant it and make it smaller? Yeah. And then I go back and I redo that and I remake all these hundreds of files. And they're like, yeah, well, I showed it to my neighbor and he said blue looks too gay. Honest quote. And so now we have to go back and change the colors. And then you showed it to your pastor and now we got to change it again. And then you showed it to your neighbor's dog and we got to change it again. And in the end, you get something that you don't like and you're not really happy with, and it doesn't look as cool as you wanted it to, but it's been created by committee now with 100 people that you asked about it, and you got all these random inputs. And there was so much stress involved in that. I felt like a kindergartner teacher. It's like, okay, class, we don't eat the paste. Now, when we pull out the paste, we're not going to eat it. And what are we not going to do? We're not going to eat the paste. Why are you eating the paste? It just drove me up the wall. And now I'm always working with people that get it. I'm always working with people that know what they're doing. And my clients are always super excited when I send the work in. They're like, oh man, this is so awesome. It's so much cooler than I expected it to be. You took it to a whole nother level. That's awesome. That's great. It's worth the pay cut to do work that I really love and to have all that stress gone. And
I don't doubt it a bit. So before age 30, you had no sign. I want to circle back a little bit. You had no sign of the Tourette's before age 30?
I had Tourette's. I had a mystery illness that we couldn't figure out what it was.
Okay.
And most of my tics were mild little things that you wouldn't notice, or just made me seem like a weird kid. Like I would tug on my clothes, and I still like pick at the seams of my clothes. I would wipe my mouth or rub my nose a lot, or I stuttered. I would repeat things I heard off of TV a lot, which isn't uncommon for a little kid. Yeah. But like when I'm jumping up and down on my bed screaming, fill it to the rim with brim, which is this old coffee commercial jingle when I was a kid. And my best friend and a little girl next door comes over to play, and I'm jumping on my bed screaming, fill it to the rim with brim for like the third day in a row. And she's like, if you don't stop saying this, I'm going home and I'm not going to play with you anymore. And I'm just sitting there crying, yelling, scream it to the rim with, fill it to the rim with brim.
Yeah.
And she got mad and left. And I'm just sitting there jumping on my bed crying. And I realized something's messed up here. Like I should be able to stop when I want to. And I would have little things where my legs would kick when I got tired, or I'd get a little twitchy when I got really tired. But most of my tics were just little things that were easy to ignore. I had more issues with the autistic-like tendencies that come with Tourette's. Yeah. Like I had more trouble with the fact that I could not read social cues to save my life. And I could not figure out this foreign language everybody else spoke of social interaction. And why did you do that? And why did you say that when that's not really true? And why did you smile when you're not really happy? And I could not figure it out. So like I had really hard time making friends and stuff as a kid. It wasn't until I got to high school and I met the thugs in high school that hung out in the smoking area, and their social cues are real easy to read. The scariest one wins. And I'm bigger than everybody else. So that was a real easy language to pick up. And so I thrived in that environment. And slowly, as I've gotten older, I have gotten much better at masking. Like I have learned this foreign language by immersing myself in it and mimicking it, and, be like, hey, did you see the game? Okay, I'll ask that to the next guy. I don't know what it means.
Yeah.
Hey, did you see the game? Oh yeah, it was awesome. Hey, he's talking to me. I don't know what we're talking about, but okay, he's talking. Yeah, I did it. It works. And so I've gotten really good at masking, at, seeming like everybody else, seeming like a neurotypical. And it works really well on my podcast and stuff. And I can be all like, hey, it's your Uncle Fish, and, be all lively and exciting and crack jokes. And like, I've learned all these tricks to use to put people at ease around me and to make people, stick around. It only really shows up now when like I get stressed out, or like if I have a problem with a client or something, and, like I send them a page and they don't like it, and they're like, just make it more awesome. And then my mask falls off and they think I'm mad, and I'm not mad. I forget to do all the extra little things that neurotypicals do to put each other at ease. Yeah. And I'm like, look, I need clear instructions. What do you want to change? Like I gave you my most awesome page. If you don't like it, that's fine. I'll change it. But make it more awesome doesn't tell me anything. Like make her hair longer, make her hips bigger, make her costume skimpy, or whatever it is you want. Tell me clearly and I'll do it. But make it more awesome doesn't help. And so, the social stuff was a lot more of an issue for me. But like I said, my Tourette's kept getting worse as I got older. So like as I got older in school, I would have bouts where it would get really bad for like a couple months at a time. And it was probably stress and other things bringing it on, and like, failing grades and all this stuff building up that gave me more stress, that made the tics worse, probably. And we would go to the doctors and they would check me for, diabetes and all the things you check kids for. And then it would never fail. Like I would have some really weird tic, and the doctors would always say, "Oh, he's faking it for attention," because that's just weird.
Huh.
Like I remember one time I had been out of school for about 2 weeks because I was shaking and I was scratching and all these different things, and I was stuttering a lot, like sounded like I was freezing because everything I tried to say. And then we go to the doctor and my eyes crossed, and they just stayed crossed for like 3 days, and I could not get them to uncross. And he saw me crossing my eyes and he's like, "Oh, well, obviously he's faking it for attention. The diabetes isn't going to make him cross his eyes. Heart disease isn't going to make him cross his eyes. Any of the things they looked at for a kid to have wasn't going to make you just cross your eyes out of nowhere. So he's faking it. Of course he's faking it." And like, I remember my mom yelling at me, saying she can cross her eyes too. It's not that big a deal. Quit faking it. You got to go back to school. And I'm just sitting there crying, and I can't even see straight enough to grab like the glass off my nightstand to try and get a drink. And I don't know what's going on. And everybody's telling me that I'm faking it. And that gets into your head, man. And that really messes with you.
Yeah.
Like for most of the rest of my life, when I would get to shaking real bad, or my legs would get to kicking, or, I would start stuttering and stuff, or start slurring my speech, I would get so mad at myself, and I would just try and force my way out of this and, quit faking it. You don't need to do this. And, like it got really, really bad before I got diagnosed. And I spent before I got diagnosed, like the last 2 years, I was out of a job. I couldn't get hired anywhere. I was shaking constantly, and no doctors are figuring anything out. My neurologist is telling me that I'm faking it. And, but all he knows about Tourette's is a paragraph he read in med school. And he told me to my face, since you don't bark or you don't cuss, it's not Tourette's. And it turns out like only 10% of people with Tourette's cuss, but he doesn't know that. He didn't really pay attention.
Okay.
And so I was shaking so bad one day I could not get off the toilet. I'm in the house by myself, and I'm just screaming at the top of my lungs, "Who the hell could you possibly be trying to impress? There's nobody here."
Yeah.
And I was so mad at myself. And then, praise God, one day the local weatherman goes on TV and does this whole big long special about the fact that he has Tourette syndrome, and has a specialist on that talks about what Tourette's really is, all the different ways that it can show up, that it's not just a cussing disease like on Deuce Bigelow or movies. Yeah. It's much more complex than that. And everybody, all of my friends start calling me like, "Hey, you've got Tourette's. This guy on TV looks just like you." I was like, "No, the doctor told me I don't, because I don't cuss." Sure. I'm like, "No, you don't have to, dude. Just watch him." And I look online, and sure enough, this dude looked exactly like me. He's a big fat dude with a beard, and he was just thrashing in his chair talking about what Tourette syndrome was, which was how I looked every day at the time.
Yeah.
And he talked about it and what it was and what it causes. And, and essentially it's like the wiring in your brain, the insulation on the wires is a little thin. So it's real easy for cross signals to go across. And like, corporalia is where we swear or we say things that we shouldn't, or, call somebody names that you shouldn't call them. And, a lot of times it's like the things that we're worried about the most, or the things that we're worried we would say, like, when you see your cousin, that you're not going to talk about her divorce, and you're not going to talk about her weight gain, and you're not going to talk about how her 3 kids have 3 different daddies. But, when you're thinking about all these things you're not going to say, in the Tourette's brain, it's real easy for one of those thinkings to cross and shoot out of your mouth. And we don't think about how little thought we put into actually saying words. Like if I'm going to say encyclopedia, I just think it and it comes out my mouth. I don't think, okay, to start with an E, I got to put my tongue. We don't do that.
Yeah, you got.
Just say it and it shoots out our mouth. It just comes out. We'll speak whole sentences and not realize what we said sometimes, or we'll call people by the wrong names. Like, we don't realize how little cognitive thought goes into it sometimes. And so it doesn't take a lot for mixed signals to shoot out, or random things that I'm thinking about in my brain to shoot out. And I kind of think of it as like, subconscious Scrabble sometimes. Like, I will think about one thing, which will lead me to a memory, which will lead me to thinking about G.I. Joe, which will lead me to yelling out, knowing is half the battle. And, it seems like it came out of nowhere, but like it kind of makes sense in my subconscious. But, and I will yell out real complex things. For a lot of people, it's just sniffs and blinks and whatnot, but, it's different for a lot of us. And, sometimes I can yell out vulgar things, if one thing leads to another, or if somebody makes a dirty joke, or if somebody swears in front of me, I'm real quick to repeat that 20 times. But that's more echolalia, which is repeating sounds you heard more than it is actually saying the swear word. I could not for the life of me figure out. One of my tics I do all the time is, I'll yell out, oh, all the time. And this commercial would come on, this lawyer commercial would come on every morning when the kids are getting ready for school. That last page would flash at the end of the commercial, and I would yell out, 9 times every time, like clockwork, every time the commercial came on. I finally paused the TV and looked, because that scene's only on there for like a second.
Right.
I paused it and looked, and there were 9 zeros on that scene, and like my brain is picking that up quick enough and yelling out all of those O's just like that every day. It was absolutely amazing to me that it could do it. I didn't know there were 9 O's on that page, but there were.
I really agree with what you said, just because of not really knowing what we're going to say next, or how we don't really. Some people don't have to think about what they're saying or enunciating words, but like it makes me think of podcasts and stuff, just because. I just literally just met you half an hour ago, and we didn't do any free stuff before this besides emails, and now we're having a full conversation. I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth next, and I probably said some shit on here.
Absolutely.
But then when you actually go back in it, it's like that was a dumb thing to say. But I mean, that's the whole kind of the beauty of the podcast, and like organic, more authentic, because everybody fucks up all the time,
Absolutely.
And then you shouldn't feel ashamed about it. But I'm not really sure I was going with that point, but. Yeah, I guess that was the whole point, is just that we talk and we have these, I guess you could say just private conversations that I feel like we would have in a bar over a burger, like you were talking about earlier, or whatever. And now we put it out to the world for people to get their thoughts, their judgments, or whatever you want to say. But yeah, I mean, I guess my whole point was that I never know what I'm really going to say. I got a thought or an idea, but for the most part, I have no idea how it's really going to come out. So it's where it works. So
that's what I enjoy about this stuff is, getting to meet other people, getting to hear other stories, getting to tell a little bit about my story. Cause like the more I explain Tourette's to you, the better chance when you run into somebody, at Walmart that's twitching and jerking and shaking in the little cripple scooter, maybe you don't call 911 and have an ambulance brought in because you assume he's having a seizure. I've had that done to me repeatedly.
Oh, damn.
I have had people like try and shove my wallet in my mouth because I think I'm having a seizure because I was shaking. And like, I had to get like dog tags made that had like, it's not a seizure, it's Tourette syndrome, and like my wife's phone number and stuff put on there. So like when people would start harassing me at the store, I could like point to it if I couldn't talk. And like I used to always wear t-shirts that said, some joke about Tourette syndrome or something like that, or Tourette syndrome makes me awesome. And so they could see it from a distance. And there's times that like I would see people looking at me concerned, trying to figure out like, is he sick? Is he on meth? Why is he shaking so much? And then they would see the shirt and you see their face lighten and they're like, oh, okay, he's got Tourette's. everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I hear from people all the time, that everybody's so mad at them, and you can see people glaring at them on the bus. And I'm like, chances are good they're trying to figure out, do you need help or am I in danger? And I have gotten such better results when I learned to just smile and wave. And like, if I yell out something really stupid in the middle of Walmart and everybody's head in the store turns to look at me, I'll just smile and wave. And maybe I'll say, sorry, it's Tourette's, and I'll keep moving. And everybody calms down and relaxes. And, they're no longer worried. Do I have to worry about this man around my kids? Or, do I need to call 911? It's like, oh, okay, he's okay with it. He's smiling. So we must be okay. Everything's fine. And it defuses so many situations that way.
You know what you just said reminds me of Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, where he actually had to pull that card out in the movie and show the people that, hey, I have that.
Oh yeah,
disability. Or
we've got cards. I wear this wristband all the time that says I have Tourette syndrome. I actually made these to give out with the first comic book that I self-published, T-Man and Hyperstrike, because it was purely aimed at kids with Tourette syndrome.
Okay.
I have met so many adults in my work advocating for Tourette's that they can't go shopping. They don't think they can hold a job. They can't get married. They can't have kids. But, my life is ruined because of this neurological disease. And, maybe they blink a lot and they sniff a little more than most folks. One kid I met was 19. He sniffed, he blinked, and he swears a couple of times a month. And he is on disability, living in government housing, eating off food stamps because his life is over and he can never do anything because he's broken. And I'm like, dude, you can drive. I'm looking through one eye with one thumb, texting on my phone at the time, stuck in bed, hadn't been out of bed for 3 days at the time. Okay. I'm like, dude, you can do anything, man. I know a dozen places that will hire you that you can work in the back. Nobody cares how much you cuss back there. Maybe you don't answer the phones, but there's lots of jobs you can have. Sure. Man. But somebody got in his head when he was a kid and told him that he was broken. I've met 50-year-old women that will not go to the grocery store because they got picked on so mercilessly in high school and middle school that they're terrified to go outside. They think everybody's going to start chanting, and they're not. But it's so hard to try and break through like 50 years of bad programming. But I thought if we can get to them when they're kids and tell them how awesome they are then, and, maybe that will help give them a little strength to make it through and not end up so broken in the end. So my comic book, T-Man and Hyperstrike, I'm looking up because I've got it on the wall with all the other comic books I've done over the last few years. It's about a superhero team, and, T-Man is the living embodiment of Tourette syndrome. He has the combined motor and vocal tics of everybody in the world with Tourette syndrome.
Yeah.
So he can shake violently enough to bust through bank vault walls, with the combined motor tics. He can scream with a million vocal tics at one time and, knock down monsters and stuff. But he also has their combined brilliance and creativity and intelligence and speed and reflexes and strength. And like, he can lift a tank because of the combined strength of everybody in the world with Tourette syndrome. And it really focuses on how many things it gives us. And, like he says in the book, is like, this makes us awesome. It gives us brilliant minds. It gives us minds that work faster than anybody else's. I have so much creativity pouring out of my brain all day long. I can come up with new characters all day long. I come up with new stories left and right because my brain runs so fast. I mean, it gave me great reflexes. It makes us great athletes and musicians. There's so many of us that are drummers. Boy, I can tear it up on the drums. And it's so easy for us to break that little part in our brain that has to coordinate things so that all four limbs can do something different on the drum set. Sure. Like, we excel at stuff like this. We make great actors and comedians and writers, and we do so many awesome things, And yeah, we shake and we jerk and we might yip and yelp a lot, but I like to say that's just our bodies burning off all our extra awesomeness. And I like that. So the whole book is just aimed around getting kids to focus on how cool they are And, and in the book, this little girl, the supervillain gives her a necklace that siphons off all of her Tourette's energy. And she goes back to being, like a normal girl. But she's also not the smartest kid in math class anymore. She's not the most talented artist. Like, she loses all these skills that made her awesome. And, and things go haywire, and she ends up having to take this power back, and she becomes her own superhero, all about encouraging the kids. I nearly sold out of that first run.
Nice.
And most of these small press indie comics, you're lucky to sell 50, 60 copies. I sold 400 without even trying.
Wow.
And it sold like hotcakes. It did so well that I have been so busy ever since illustrating other people's books, I haven't been able to do a second issue. But I've worked on like over 30 books in the last 3 years since then. And, I couldn't work on so many books if my brain didn't run so fast and I didn't get stuff done so quickly. But, it's been a real gifting for me. Yeah, I might shake a lot. And yeah, sometimes I might make a fool of myself in Walmart, but that's okay. I can take that. I've made a fool of myself for a lot less reasons than other times. I'm not hung up about it. People stare at me. I got over that a long time ago.
So are people calling and wanting a second book already, or?
Oh man, people were wanting it right away. And I regret that I haven't got to it yet. It's on my plans. I just signed with a new publisher, and I'm fixing to launch in April 4th. I'm launching the Kickstarter for my new book, Greenzone: Life in the Blocks. Okay. And it's a whole different thing aimed at, the larger comic book audience, not just people with Tourette syndrome. But there's a whole lot of my life put into this book too, and a whole lot of experiences that I've had that go directly into this book. And a lot of people are, making correlations to the story in this book, to the things that are happening in the news right now, and the Black Lives Matter movement, and the protest against the police, and police abuses and all this stuff. And I'm glad that it spurs that kind of recognition, and that anybody can look at this book and say, hey, I see myself in this, and I see what I've been through, is awesome. But so much of it's taken straight out of my life, and having people treat me bad because I look different. Not only am I bigger than everybody else, but when you're shaking and look scary, people are quick to pull a gun. Like, things have gone bad very quickly for me at times. And I've always been able to talk my way out of it, but I have stared down the barrel of a lot more guns than most people have in their lives and survived. But, it all goes together. I'm really excited for this Greenzone book that's coming out.
That's when you sent me that, and I got a little snippet of it. I don't want to spoil anything, but where'd you get the premise of it? So let me make sure I get it right, though, that people were born with powers, and they actually have to go into like a jail for 5 years before they're actually they're good to go, or they're a citizen or something along those lines.
Close. It's anybody can be born a genome with superpowers. And once you get tested and they find out you get shoved into green zones, which are basically like reservations in the big cities, and you get put into the blocks, which are these like super powered ghettos, and they're built super thick and super heavy so that people don't laser blast it and tear it up, or shoot fireballs, or, whatnot. You got all kinds of different people with powers, but some people might be able to fly and pick up a tank. Other people might be able to read your mind. Somebody else might be able to magnetize paper clips to their fingertips, or, maybe they're a little bit faster at math. Maybe they just have pointed ears and spots. Maybe they just have scaly skin. Like, it can be any number of things. And whatever it is, no matter how minor it is, you're labeled a genome, you're no longer human, and you lose all your rights as a citizen. And so you can either spend the rest of your life living in the blocks, or, the humans look at genomes as like walking nuclear weapons. You're just a supervillain waiting to happen. And when they tried forcing integration and stuff back in the 60s, and they put some poor little genome kids into the regular public schools with the poor little human kids, and the human kids picked on them mercilessly, one kid blew up, and that's the end of it. They're all monsters. They all need to be shoved away and forgotten about. And they passed a law eventually to give them a path out. And if you can prove you're one of the good ones by serving the greater good for 5 years, then you can get your citizenship and your green card, and you can vote, and you can own a business and stuff. So you have to either like join the military, join the fire department, the police, something like that, and risk your life for 5 years to prove you're not a danger to humans to get out.
I see.
And so this is following, Life in the Blocks is following a group of new recruits to the police force on their first shift. And we're going to follow them along, like any new recruit cop story, except it's in this crazy world where anybody can have superpowers. And some people are lucky. Some people get picked out of school when they're in middle school, and they're like, hey, we're going to take you up to the big leagues. You're going to get trained to be a superhero. Some people get picked by the military in high school, and they get trained into special forces, and they have long, illustrious military careers, and get paid well and don't have to deal with a bunch of racism and stuff.
Yeah.
Like the cops get the worst of it, because there's been a long history of genome cops that get treated like crap by the humans, and they get treated as race traders by the genomes that like to go to the blocks and take it out on people. And you saw that in the first part of the book. Virgil, one of the characters that we follow in this, is like an 8-foot tall lizard monster looking guy. And he's actually less of a genome than almost anybody else in the book. Like the only difference to his genetic makeup is that he's tall and he has scales, but he looks terrifying.
Sure.
And he is the most peaceful guy you could ever meet. The only thing he wants to do with his entire life is get out of the blocks, open a bookstore, and just surround himself by books. And he can spend the rest of his life pretending to be somebody who doesn't look so terrifying, and go on adventures in books and never have to deal with people anymore. Like that's his dream. He is the most peaceful guy. He looks like a scary monster that's going to eat you, but he's not, and like his only real power is a crazy defense mechanism that if you want to see a glimpse of it, you can go to my website, mrfish.com, sign up for the newsletter. You get the free preview copy, and you can get a free copy of T-Man and Hyperstrike, and check that out. And I ain't going to spam you with newsletters. I'm just going to let you know when the Kickstarter's starting and stuff like that, because this is going to be an ongoing series. And I'm hoping I'm going to do every quarter this year. And next year, I'm going to go every other month. And from then on, it's going to be my only job. And I'm hoping to toss out some more issues of T-Man and Hyperstrike after I switch over, because right now I'm still doing other people's comics, but there's just so many people that want me to do their books. And I could stay busy all year long and pay all my bills doing their books, but I never get to tell my stories. And my stories are cool, and I really want to tell them. So I had to say, all right, look, I'm putting a line in the sand. This is the point. By the end of the year, it's my stuff and nothing else. So that's what we're working towards. And it's a little scary, but I'm really excited. I think when people see Greenzone, they're going to dig it, and they're going to see just how much potential there is for storytelling in here, with the corruption and the suffering and, all the different levels of things that happen within genome society. Like there are people that are really scary looking, like Virgil. And then there are people like his training officer, Danny Kim, that looks absolutely human. And you would not be able to tell he was a genome for nothing. And his powers are very minor. And he's what the other gnomes call a lawn gnome, because the humans like to keep him around for decoration and say, see, I've got one. See, one of my best friends is a gnome. Yeah, I wouldn't let him in my house, but I like to keep him around. One of our managers is a gnome. And they tend to get all these easy positions and stuff. And, they're the only ones that are going to get, Virgil's not going to get promoted. He's going to stay at the bottom of the ladder forever because he looks terrifying. And doesn't matter how sweet he is or how kind he is, and you're going to see people that were perfectly normal at 20 and then transformed into a genome, and suddenly they went from living a life of luxury to now they're living among scary gnomes that they've been afraid of their whole lives. And now they are one. You see people like Bellamy is one of the characters in the book, and she's got purple spikes all over her body. Like everywhere we have body hair, she has porcupine spikes. And you can just see from her body language, she's constantly like afraid and holding in her arms, because if she just bumps into somebody on the subway, she'll get charged with an unlawful use of supernatural force charge. And she could go to prison if she sticks a human with one of these spines on her body. She can't help that. Like, she's covered in it. Like, you bumped into me, but she could go to prison for that. She is constantly afraid. She is constantly uncomfortable in her own skin. And, and we get to see what she goes through. What's it like when you fall in love with somebody, but nobody can touch you without getting hurt? Like, there's so much awesome potential in this place. Like, I could tell stories on this place for years. I'm done with the first issue. I'm nearly done with the second issue. In my brain, I'm working on the 6th issue right now.
Oh, wow.
And it's going to be good, folks. You want to get ready for it.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, so, you said earlier your minds were always racing. You got tons of stories and thoughts. I mean, do you have a journal or something that you write down each story or each, plot you want to keep? And
oh, yeah, man, I've got so many notes saved on my phone. I've got one note on my phone, that's set up as a grocery list, so you can tick them off. Sure. This thing is like 15 pages long because every time something happens in my life, I think, oh, wait a minute. What if that happened in Greenzone? What if that happened to Bellamy? What if that happened to Virgil? What if that happened to Kim? Because he can get away with a lot more because he looks normal. He can leave the Greenzone anytime he wants and go to a restaurant or something. Bellamy gets guns drawn on her if she ends up out of the Greenzone.
Yeah.
And so you see all this different stuff going on. Or I'll be watching TV, or you watch a cop show or something. You're like, oh, wait a minute. If that happened here, and if some of those super powered gangsters that I have in the back of my mind that are going to show up later, if they did this, and if there were genome bounty hunters, and what does the FBI look like with genomes in it? And what does the SWAT team look like? And, I've got plans for like a series on the fire department, following a firehouse around. I've got plans for like a special forces unit that I would like to follow around. And there is like a superhero organization that you're going to see in the background called Alpha. And they take on powered people from around the world, aliens, cyborgs, all kinds of stuff, and train them and use them as a superhero team. So like, if you're a professional hero, you're working for them, and the cops have to do cleanup, and the cops have to do like riot control around things when giant robots are attacking the city and stuff. Like, you get to see like what I think life would really be like in this world. And, the crappy end of the stick that some people get in this situation. And, you get to see them risk their lives to save people's lives, but they're still not respected by the humans, and they're still hated by the genomes. And, and all they want to do is make a better life for themselves. Like Bellamy with the spikes, her training officer, she's got 8 months left on the job before she hits her 5 years, and then she's out. And, she is so ready to be done, but she's a serious cop and she takes her job very seriously. You'll see other people in the book that are just filling space and, just riding out the clock. She takes her job seriously, but she's legit afraid that Bellamy's going to get her killed because, Bellamy does not know what she's doing and does not realize how scary she is to people. And we're going to see stuff get blown way out of proportion very quickly just because Bellamy gets out of a car and humans are scared of her. And, and then we see what happens from there. Oh man, there's so much good stuff. I just want to give everything away.
I love your excitement about it, man. Like I know we're doing this virtually, but man, I can just feel how excited you are and how passionate you are about it.
And like, I have been mulling on this story for like 10 years. And every time we would go to a con and we're tabling and stuff and we're talking with other people, my son was eventually like, you have told so many people this story. If you don't do it, somebody else is about to do it. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. I do need to do that. And I finished one book for a client in 12 days over 3 weeks, which is my fastest I've ever gotten a book done.
Yeah.
But I'm quick, but that was really quick. And so I had like a month scheduled that I was supposed to do, his book, but his book was done and I'm paid for the month already because I finished the book. So okay, let's get started. And I knocked out the pencils for the first 2 issues, got the first 2 issues almost completely inked, got the first issue colored, lettered, ready to go. And, then I found a publisher with some like-minded guys that are working together, and I really like what they're doing. They were a few steps ahead of me on the indie comics ladder, and, they've taken me on, and we're helping work together to lift everybody's boat at the same time. And I'm really excited to work with them. And they're good at the stuff I'm not good at, and I'm good at stuff that I'm good at, and we can work together and be successful. And so I'm really excited to see where this goes. And either it's a success and I get to pay all my bills next year drawing Greenzone and T-Man and Hyperstrike, or it fails miserably and I go back to drawing other people's awesome comics and I put out another 30 comics in the next 3 years. That ain't a bad second place, son. I ain't worried about that.
Not bad at all.
That ain't bad at all.
So here's a good question I was thinking about while you were talking. That is it a standard in the comic industry to release like an issue a month or every bi-monthly, or is it just depending on the comic or the artist or the illustrator or what?
The big 3 companies, Marvel, DC, Image, they want to do a book every month. Yeah. I would love to put out a book every month. I could put out a book every month if I had an inker and a colorist as fast as I am. Absolutely, I could put it out. I could write it and pencil it and letter it, and we could get this thing knocked out. It's finding other people as fast as me that's tough. Right. So if I have to do it all myself, and I have to help run the Kickstarter, and I have to go on shows and help pitch the books and stuff and say, hey, don't forget to check out Greenzone when it comes to Kickstarter. Sign up for my newsletter and you'll be kept up to date. All that stuff, like that takes time. And so, like, I think getting to every other month is going to be really good. If I can find that right team, though, if I can find that right inker and that right colorist that are as fast as I am, whoo, son, we fixing to tear up some books, man. I am fixing to start laying some pages down. Because that's literally the only thing holding me back right now, is just finding the right team that has the right skill set and the right speed.
Yeah, just put the people around you, and you can go some good people around you, go some places, just like you said. Mm-hmm. Where was your inspiration? I mean, like, as far as, did you have a favorite comic book series you read growing up? I know you talked about the Goose earlier, but I mean, did you?
I loved them all. I mean, I loved Spider-Man. I loved Batman. I had a real affinity for characters that you could hope to be, like, Iron Man and Batman and things like that. If I tried hard enough and trained hard enough, you could be Batman. Uh-huh. If I could figure out how to build that suit, if I could just figure out how to make those jets work to make me fly, I could be Iron Man. I know it. If I could just figure out the power source issue, and, I could do it. And they spurred my imagination. They got me going. But I mean, also, like, I loved all the fantasy stuff from like He-Man and Thundercats and Silverhawks, and like, I loved it all, and I love to mash it all together in my imagination and see what comes out. I've been working on one story for 20 years about a time traveling barbarian, and he goes to all kinds of different worlds and all kinds of different places, and that's a story I'm going to do after Greenzone. I got to build up enough of an audience, because that story is so good. It is so juicy. It is so rich, like the Star Wars universe. There's so much in it to dig into. I need a bigger audience to read it before I put that out there. And so I'm hoping to build it with Greenzone, because Greenzone is good. But man, I love all these stories, but I loved the X-Men too. Like, I didn't like them in the beginning when I was a kid, because in the beginning when I was little, maybe middle school age, I thought they were a cop-out. And Stan Lee has admitted the X-Men were a cop-out. Like, he didn't want to have to keep coming up with where he thought of powers, so they were just born that way, which lends itself to a lot of awesome storytelling, which lends itself to a lot of people being able to identify with, if I feel like I was born differently, if I was born with a neurological condition that makes me different than everybody else, that's easy to identify with. If I was born a different color or a different gender or, whatever, like, if I came from a different country, all these things, it's easy for people to identify with when you don't feel like everybody else around you. When I was a teenager, I understood that better and I saw the value in it and I fell in love with it. Like right before Jim Lee came on, I fell in love with it. And, I loved it ever since. But still, to me, as much crap as they've gone through, it's still a little bit rosy interpretation for me. I don't really think people treat them horribly, but I don't think it's as real as it really would be because we're nasty.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we get really nasty if we disagree with somebody in the slightest.
Oh,
That's what drives me nuts with the political stuff and all that. Like, if you can't be on one side or the other without everybody on the other side being a heartless, soulless monster, then there's no point in even having a conversation. If everybody on the other side from me is a monster, then we can't work anything out. We're never going to get anywhere if you're a monster. If we disagree on a couple of points, that's one thing. But if you're an absolute racist, homophobic redneck, or you're a crazy social justice warrior, libtard snowflake, like we can't get anywhere if the other side is soulless. And there's that drives me nuts. And the world is just going further and further down that direction, yelling louder and louder and louder in these opposite directions. And you wonder how I come up with a word like this for Greenzone. Like, this is what we do to each other. And it frustrates me because we can be so much better than that. We have seen humanity do so much better than that at times. And there's times that we really rise above. And when we come together and we treat each other with respect, things can be so much better. Just get so selfish and short-sighted so often.
I was talking to one of my colleagues earlier today, and we were kind of talking about like how people cannot, like you basically exactly what you just said, cannot have a discussion anymore without trying to talk over the other person, saying, "Hey, my point of view is right, your point of view is wrong." And that's where we kind of got into how because we both listen to a lot of podcasts, and we were talking about our favorite podcasts and how it's nice to, even though you may not agree with, let's say Elon Musk wants where he's wanting to go to Mars or whatever. It's just like you hear like a 2-minute snippet on the news today or whenever why he's wanting to go to Mars, but when you actually get to listen to a podcast, like, well, let's hear what he's got to say, and it's actually just not always well, but drawn out like, hey, let's hear his thoughts. Let's talk about it. Let's break it down a little bit more without him just saying, "I'm going to Mars and we're taking the whole world with us," or whatever, and
it's not as crazy when you actually hear somebody spell out their whole point.
Right.
And these are the reasons why I want to do XYZ, instead of just, oh, it's this. It's a buzzword that's going to make everybody mad. And, and when you boil it down to that, it doesn't even matter if that buzzword's true. It doesn't even matter if that thing's happening. Now you're spending all your time arguing about this buzzword instead of actually listening and learning. And so much of what we're afraid of from the other side, whatever that side is, usually isn't really anything. Like, there's usually no real substance to it. It's just fear mongering for the most part.
Sure.
And, it, and I'm somebody, if I have an opinion on something, I can be real pigheaded at times. Absolutely. Ask my wife. She will tell you if she thinks I will never change my mind if I have decided something.
Yeah.
Which isn't true. I do change my mind. I've changed my mind a lot over the last few years. Like, there's a lot of things that have happened to our society over the last 10 years that have really made me have to take a long, hard look at positions that I held for a long time and be like, you know what? I can't stand behind that anymore. If nothing else, because I can't stand behind that because of who all else is standing behind that. Like, I don't want to be associated with these people anymore. So, I had to let go and rethink of some things and get to know some people that I didn't know and get to see their point of view and stuff. And, and too many people don't do that. Like, too many people are quick to get upset about the Black Lives Matter movement. And, like it's going to take something away from white people, but they have not had to worry about, are my kids going to come home safe at night? Because my kids, two of my boys are Filipino. My daughter-in-law is Black. My grandkids are Black. My stepkids are Native American. Like, my family is all kinds of different colors. And I've had some kids that I'm a lot more worried about coming home late at night than I am about others. One of my kids is pasty white and the other is really brown. And, he he loves bicycling. Like he's wanting to bicycle across the country. He loves it. He loves extreme sports and stuff. He used to practice cycling at night when he got off of work, and he'd be driving all these back roads in the country, going on like 80-mile bike rides after work at night. And occasionally he gets harassed by dogs. He wanted to get a concealed carry license so that he could carry a pistol with him on his rides. So if he gets hurt, he could get a dog off of him, mostly just to scare dogs off. And I was like, man, you cannot be a dark brown man riding around these country roads in the middle of the night with a gun. Like you cannot be. If you get pulled over by a cop, you're going to get shot. I will get asked to see my concealed carry permit. You could get shot before they ever see it. Like and if you haven't had to worry about that, this might seem kind of ridiculous. But, if you'll stop and listen to people that have had to worry about their kids coming home safe at night, it's not such a ridiculous thing anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've never really had to go through any kind of experiences like that, but, I've heard stories and people on here tell me certain things like that. And it just opens up my eyes that to even be thinking myself to even be put in that type of situation, just, yeah, what would I do or whatever. But, and, and I want to, talking about politics and movements and stuff. I mean, have you seen the new Batman yet?
Oh man.
So
yeah, I did.
My point is that there was I can't remember if I read the article on IGN or where the article was, but anyway, I don't want to, hopefully this shouldn't spoil anything. For those who haven't seen it, I don't think it's a spoiler, but could be. So either muted or not. Anyway, but towards the end of the movie, when they're in the Gotham Garden, that Matt Reeves was actually talking about, he wrote that script in 2017, but people were saying he took inspiration from the Capitol riots for that scene, just because of the Riddler getting people from the internet like QAnon and trying to gear up to take out, the mayor right then and all that stuff. And it's like, no, I wrote this in 2017. That's not what my intent was at all. That was just, I guess, a coincidence.
But that's the thing. Like, it can be seen now. Like, I was writing this story like 10 years ago, long before the police brutality issues that have been so, shown in the media lately, before all the protests and stuff, before it became a big thing on the news every day. Like I was writing this stories a long time ago. Not that these weren't still issues. Like these were issues when I was a kid. And, I nearly got shot by a cop. Like there's a scene in the first preview pages that you can see if you go to mrfish.comics.com and sign up for my newsletter. You can get the free preview. In it, you see Virgil, like he's 5 years old. He's big and scary, because he's a giant and a lizard monster looking dude. But because he stands up to these cops and he says, "No, sir," the cops take it as an insult, because the cops are used to being berated. The cops are used to being talked down to because they're genome cops. And they think he's smarting off to them by saying, "No, sir." He's trying to defuse the situation. He's trying to be respectful. He's doing everything he was told to do. Yeah. If you say, "Yes, sir," if you comply, if you do this, like you won't get hurt. He's trying to do what's right, but he's also trying to keep this little girl from getting hurt. And so he says, "No, sir," to these cops, and they get furious. "You making fun of me, you little maggot? And, you think you're funny?" And the only thing he can think of to say is, "No, sir." And he gets beaten nearly to death for that. And, it goes very badly for him. That came straight out of my life because, like when I was a teenager, now admittedly, I was a thug, a hoodlum. I had I had a mohawk drawn out really long, black trench coat, used to paint my fingernails black and grow them out, cut them to spikes and, like the whole 9 yards. I was trying to be as scary as I could be to keep people at a distance from me. And me and a bunch of my friends were out in the middle of the night being stupid. I got people surfing on the hood, people surfing on the top of the car, hanging out all four windows. I'm hanging out the window, driving with a string attached to my steering wheel. We're all drunk, screaming, doing like 55 in a 20 in a residential area with the headlights off at 2 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
Cop drives by and sees us. He spends like the next 10 minutes trying to track us down, but he keeps making wrong turns. I pulled into a gas station. I'm filling up with gas. Here comes the cop. I'm going to jail. There's no question. I am going to jail. This is going to happen. The only question is, am I going to go with broken bones or am I going to walk in? And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make this as easy as possible. And this black officer gets out of the car, comes running up to me in South Mississippi, and he starts yelling at me, you know why I'm pulling you over? And I was like, yes, sir, I do. And he got furious. Now I know, as a black police officer, in a South Mississippi town in 93, he probably caught a lot of flack from white people. Sure. Like I get, he probably suffered a lot of stuff. And this teenage, white boy in the middle of the night that's been out acting stupid, that he's expecting one thing from, and I look like I'm going to give it. Like I look like the guy that's going to cause a bar fight and, going to take on the cops. Like I put a lot of effort into that look. I don't blame him for making assumptions, but he gets furious at me for, you being a smart mouth boy. You think you're being funny? And I'm like, no, sir. And he takes that little flap off of his gun, and starts yelling at me again, a series of things. You think you're being a smart ass. You know what I could do to you? And I was like, no, sir, I don't mean any disrespect, sir. Yeah. And the gun starts to come out of the holster. And I'm like, I'm going to get shot for trying to be polite to a police officer. And if the Wendy's had not gotten robbed right then, and the call came over the radio,
wow,
I could either be dead or still in prison right now. He cussed me out and left, and they ended up catching a guy that had robbed like every fast food place in town for like 3 months. He had been robbing every place. And then he picked the Wendy's of all the stupidest places to pick, because there's a red light right outside of it and you're always stuck trying to get out. He's just stuck in the parking lot, can't get out because of the red light. And they got his car and his license plate and his, all this stuff. Oh, the dumbest choice. But hey, he saved my life. So thank you, idiot, Wendy's robber in the pen. I appreciate you. Thank you for your sacrifice. But I know what it was like to be harassed like that, but I also know that I've got the privilege that I could move to a different town, cut my hair, change the way I look, and I quit getting pulled over. Yeah. And, not everybody has that luxury. And I realize that, so like a lot of people, I've had a lot of my friends, who are black creators telling me like, oh man, you must have gotten this story from, somebody, and I'm like, actually, these are all mine. This is all straight out of my life. I'm glad you can identify with it. I'm glad you can see the injustice in it and that it can speak to you. But yeah, this is all stuff straight out of me.
What were your thoughts on the new Batman?
It was so good. I had no real expectations for it. I didn't think it was going to be super cool, but I was like, it's a movie. We'll have fun. It was so good. I mean, like there are maybe 3 or 4 things in the movie that bugged me throughout it. And they are so small, superficial things. Like in one scene, the fact that Catwoman takes off her motorcycle helmet and has her knit mask on perfectly underneath it, and it doesn't get pulled off. That bugs me. That's like the comic book where they yank off Daredevil's mask and Matt Murdock has his black sunglasses on underneath. And I'm like, how'd you pull that off? They're not even cockeyed. They're just perfectly on there. Like, oh, like we wouldn't know it's Matt Murdock if he didn't have the blind glasses on. But like little things like that bugged me. But, otherwise, or like, when she goes from wearing this practically see-through shirt to zipping up her Catwoman suit, and suddenly her bosoms are twice the size they were before. I found that unnecessary. She's a beautiful woman. She's beautiful the way she is. I don't think anybody is going to confuse her in that cat suit for a guy just because she doesn't have, large chest sticking out. I felt like that was distracting and unnecessary when it was such a drastic change from one scene to the next. But that's a little thing. The storytelling is good. The basics of the story is so good. It made a Batman that I could actually believe in. Like I can believe somebody could pull this off. Because up until now, it's all been fun, but you can't really do that. But there's not much they do in this that's like, he couldn't do that. Maybe how fast he switches out of his costume, but again, small thing. The rest of it is so awesome. I was floored. I did not expect it to be that good, and it is now legit. Like, I'm thinking one of my top Batman interpretations of all time.
I agree.
And I was shocked.
Yeah, I'm still. I was hesitant just because of Robert Pattinson and what reviews I was seeing on, but I also the Batman with Michael Keaton was one of my favorite movies ever, and that was one of the first Batmans I ever saw. And people were hesitant with him coming in playing Batman.
Oh yeah,
I thought he crushed.
How's Mr. Mom going to be Batman?
Exactly,
but he killed it.
I think he did too.
Yeah,
he crushed it, man. I mean, the whole gothic Bruce Wayne part of it, I was kind of like, well, that's not typical, with the Christian Bale Bruce Wayne version of being the playboy.
Mm-hmm.
But I liked it. I dug it. It was edgy.
Oh, I cool. really liked him being more obviously broken as a human. Like, yeah, the comic books have us, a lavish playboy lifestyle, and he keeps up all these appearances and stuff. But that's really hard to do, especially with as much time as he puts into being Batman. And when this isn't a Batman that has, tons of pre-made equipment, like you see him working on the Batmobile through the thing, when it's not somebody that has a Lucius Fox building stuff for him, or a Wayne Tech that he can borrow tanks from and ride through the city. And might I just add, if you want to talk about believability, the thing that bugged me the most about the Christian Bale Batman is, how does he get a freaking tank from his estate outside of the city into Gotham and nobody notices? Like, nobody's like, Big 10-4 there, buddy. Yeah, Smokey, you want me to be on the lookout because I just saw the bat tank driving down I-40. Like, somebody is going to rat you out along the way. You're going to get caught on a traffic cam somewhere. Like, that does not make sense. That bugs me more than Catwoman's mask when she takes off her helmet.
I love it, man. Because I don't ever think of little things like that. But now that you mention it, it's like, damn, how did he do that?
Oh yeah. These are the things that I think through all the time. It's one of the things people like about like my character designs and stuff, because like I think through, how are you going to get in this costume? How do you get out of this costume? Like, how do your powers work? So I know how to design the costume to work around that. Like, if you shoot fireballs out of your elbows, do you need to have open patches on your elbows? Do you rest of the material need to be fireproof? Like, I like to think this stuff through, and it brings a air of, a little bit more believability to it. And, you can see little bits of things that make sense in the costume. And I dig that. And like, I think through the fight scenes and stuff, and think through the scenes that happened before and the scenes that are going to come after, and where was everybody, where are they coming from, how can I make it super clear in the scene that this is what happened, and she lost her baton, she ain't going to have that for the rest of the book because it fell off the building, unless I show her going to get it, it's gone. And but I love that stuff. It helps keep you in the suspended disbelief. It helps keep you in the fantasy when you don't have these jarring things like, her baton flew off the top of the building, now I have it back. And then you're like, wait a minute, where'd that come from? And now you're out of the fight, you're out of the excitement, you're out of the adventure.
That fight can make or break the comic, right? Just whoever's the reader could be like, man, that's not real, this is trash, and to stop reading right there, right?
Or when you have like a Batman just like kick the Hulk into the air. No, I'm sorry. Like, you're strong, dude, but like, no Olympic athlete is going to kick like 1,000 pounds of Hulk into the air. It's not going to happen. You might get creative with some stuff, but that's taking it too far, and that stuff will take you out of the fantasy so fast.
When illustrating these comics, who was it that designed Wonder Woman? Like, kind of what you were saying earlier, they gave Catwoman some bigger tits, but right, for her costume. I mean, back in the day, was the guy who designed or made Wonder Woman like into S&M and stuff, and that's why.
Yeah.
So is that kind of just the artist behind it? Is like, are they trying to attract more of the male audience dig into that, or they want to make female characters just look as good as they can because mostly males.
And he was also like a psychologist and stuff. So like he wanted to make Wonder Woman to be an empowering figure for women, but he was also into like, you know, women should be superior over men. And he liked to be tied up, and his, you know, his second wife always wore these bracelets of her servitude. Like there's a lot of weird stuff going on. Also the guy that invented the lie detector, just little tidbit. But most of the time now, yeah, so many of the female characters are designed to just like get the teenage boy libido going, and it aggravates me to no end to see, you know, these female characters in like a stainless steel string bikini and a thong with like, you know, metal thigh high fishnet stockings, and I'm like, okay, so like Godzilla's attacking, aliens are invading from outer space. Quick, let me put on my battle lingerie. And as long as the first lady and my nipples are covered, I cannot die. Like that makes no sense. Like if you're bulletproof, okay, I get maybe you wear something, a little more show off. And some characters, I get their sensuality and the way they look being a part of who they are. Like if that's a fundamental part of their character, like, maybe this is some flawed, broken, valley girl that does not know how to work in society if she's not the center of everybody's attention. And you got to be looking at me. Like you can make an interesting character out of that. But just every female hero has to be wearing high heels and a thong. That's freaking ridiculous. Like that just doesn't make sense. And you can make these characters look awesome and look sexy and be covered and be protected and not be freezing, and
no, I agree 100% what you're saying.
I've done so many like Wonder Woman redesigns, like, just sketching, playing around it for my kids, where, she's wearing pants or she's wearing like a leather outfit or something, or like, you can do all kinds of cool things that she still looks beautiful. She still looks, like an idol that you could look up to, but, she doesn't look like a stripper. And, and most of the time she doesn't. Her costume, it's revealing, but it's not over the top. But just about everything since is just over the top. And when you get into the indie comic scene, it can get really bad. And those books will sell for 5 times what mine will on Kickstarter.
Just because the raunchiness, or
oh yeah, you don't have to be a good artist. You don't have to be a good storyteller. If you have lots of, nudity and lots of giant balloon boobs, like you can get 20, 30, 50 grand on a Kickstarter for it. If I didn't have so many young girls in my life that I love and, on it, if I didn't have a daughter, if I didn't have my daughter-in-laws, if I wasn't worried about all these young women in the world that I love and look up to me, it would be an easy payday. But I just can't stand behind it. I can't show it to my friends and my family and say, this is what I did. I'm proud of this. I've got like 30 books on the wall around me surrounding where I work here. And I can point you to all but one of these and let anybody look at it. One of them gets a little gory. One of them has a guy get ripped in half by a unicorn. Everything else is all ages friendly. It's exciting. It's adventurous. There's romance. There's beautiful women. There's all kinds of stuff. But like, you don't got to be nasty. Like the Blair Witch Project was an absolutely terrifying movie, terrified the whole nation. And you never see a monster. You never see blood. You see piles of rocks, some stick figures. The scariest thing in the entire movie is a guy standing with his nose in the corner. And it freaks you out.
It does.
It can be scary. It can be exciting. It can be terrifying without, oh, look at my intestines, or look down my shirt. Like it can be beautiful and sexy and enticing without, having to be raunchy. But,
yeah, I remember the first time I watched Blair Witch Project. I can't remember when it came out.
Dude.
I was like 12, 13, maybe.
Oh, man.
I mean, like, yeah, just like you said, like this way it was filmed, it was so realistic, but there was no guts. There was no gory. There was one guy at the end of it dancing in the corner or whatever. So it's like, that's
And
fucking scary.
that set a bar for me that I have been trying to reach ever since. Because like I used to really love horror movies and stuff, like I loved Freddy Krueger growing up and all that stuff until the movies turned from like cool ideas and jokes and like like funny bits in there too, and went from like cool ideas and scary monsters to just how much blood can we dump out and how much gore can we pack into one scene. That lost my interest. Like that's a low bar to hit. But when Blair Witch Project came out, I was like, man, they terrified me. I was scared of the dark. Like I did not want to turn off the lights in my house when I went to bed at night because I was scared of the dark again as a grown man because of this movie. And all it was just a couple of people and a camcorder in the woods. And, like the fact that they got into my mind and made me so afraid with the writing and they didn't have to show anything terrifying has set a challenge for me that I've been trying to reach ever since. Like I want to make somebody that afraid. It's right up there with this panel I saw where it was an online web comic that I cannot remember the name of, but this girl's in love with this guy and he doesn't reciprocate her feelings. And in these 3 little short panels in the middle of the page, you just see her heart break as she realizes he's never going to feel the way she feels. And it's almost the same image 3 times. It's just the most subtle changes in her face. And you just see her heart break. And I literally cried when I read that. And that's become another goal. Like I want to terrify you without showing you the monster. And I want somebody to cry because my character's heart's breaking. Like those are goals I have set that I am striving towards.
I'm glad you have it, man. So one last question before we get off here. If somebody is wanting to get into comic books, someone's starting out, just they find a writer they really like and just follow that storyline and what they're writing, or does they find like a guy who like yourself who's drawing, illustrating everything, just who had not so much the storytelling in this one, but I love the illustrations and I love the pictures. I mean, should I follow that storyline, or what would be your advice to somebody? Just follow like a hero they like and go after.
Study. Man, I devoured comics as a kid. And I mean, I studied them page after page over and over and over and over again. And how did they lay out the panels and where are the characters in the panels?
Yeah.
And, why do I care about this character? And I do the same thing with TV shows and movies. The fact that a TV show, like a hospital drama, can make me care about a character and weep when that character dies at the end of 22 minutes that I didn't know existed 22 minutes ago, did not exist in my world. And now I'm weeping that they're crying because little Timmy's never going to make it to his baseball game. And I'm just weeping like, how did they do that? And I'm tearing it apart. Like, what things did they tap into that we all share that'll make us emotional? What stories and dreams and fears did they tap into that are going to do? How did they make me care about this character in this amount of time? Yeah. Like my T-Man and Hyperstrike book, I rewrote the script 4 times because there just wasn't enough time to make you care about the little girl in the book. Like, not really care. She could be tacked in, but you had to care about what happened to her. And so I ended up rewriting it into it. Up until then, it was a superhero introduction story that had a little girl in it. Now it's a story about this little girl that just so happens to introduce the superheroes. And that gave me the room and the time to make you care about her and make you care about her friendships and show how much her friends love her and how smart she was and talented and all this stuff, so that when she loses all this, it matters. Like, I'm constantly picking apart movies and comics. And that's the thing. Storytelling translates from one form to the other. Like, how do they do it in a book that you love? How do they do it, in the audio drama that you like to listen to? How do they do it in your favorite TV show? How do they do it in these movies? Like, tear it all apart. I'm constantly looking at movies and TV shows and saying, like, how they framed it, how they used color. Wow. The way they lit stuff in Batman and the way they lit it with reds and blues and stuff in some of the scenes.
It's beautiful. The cinematography is beautiful.
Phenomenal. I guarantee you're going to see some of that in future issues of Greenzone, because that was so inspiring to me, the way they just bathed the scene in it. And I loved it. And when the right part in the story comes up for that, absolutely, I'm going to use that. I'm going to pull that. And like I do so many other things that I've been inspired from. If you want to be an artist, practice, study the storytelling. Like, the artists are just as responsible for the storytelling in comics as the writer is. If you want to be a writer, study the stories, look at the scripts. Like, you can find scripts online for a whole lot of comics. Find scripts from authors that you like and that you love to follow. See how they wrote it out. See what they put in the script and what they didn't put in. How much detail did they put in? How much did the artist bring to it? Because as I found out working on so many of these other books, if you find somebody that can collaborate with you, you can come out with so much better final product. Like, if you make the best story you can write and then give it to me and I make it the most awesome I can make it from my end, then we are going to have the most awesome product. If you have everything nailed down so tight, you're like, no. I want him on that side of the panel. No, I want it to be 6 panels, not 7. No. This needs to be a wide establishing shot. This needs to be a close-up. Then you're going to get the best book you can create, not the best book we could create. Yeah. But if you can collaborate and work together, oh man, the stories can grow exponentially. Like, some of the writers I've worked real closely with, they give me the script. I'm like, well, what if we did this? And they're like, oh, if we did that, then that could do this and that. Oh, and then that would put them here. And that would make this matter so much more. And oh, that's when you've got gold. Like, I've done some stuff I'm really proud of on these walls behind me. And, it's because we were collaborating. That's a big part of it.
Fish, you're one bad dude, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Dude, this is great. I appreciate all of it. Before we get off here, people want to find your stuff, find you. I know you've kind of mentioned it a couple of times, but go ahead and say it again. MrFishComics.com is my website. It's not the best website, but it does have a link where you can sign up to my newsletter to be kept up to date on all the new Greenzone books that are going to be coming out, the Kickstarters, and you'll get a free preview copy of the first issue of Greenzone. You'll get a free full copy of T-Man and Hyperstrike. I am Mr. Fish Comics on all the other social medias, Facebook, TikTok. If you check out my Mr. Fish Comics on TikTok, I do a whole series on there about tips and advice for young artists that are coming up and anybody working in comics, really, how to find artists, how to commission artists, how to be a good artist. I did a whole series. The whole first set of my TikToks was on don't spend the money till the job's done. I did like 15 episodes on that because that's so important and it gets young artists in trouble. Yeah. But you can follow me on all social media, Mr. Fish Comics, and check out Greenzone. It's coming to Kickstarter in April. I'm super excited about it. You are not going to regret it. You the man, Fish. You the man. I appreciate this a lot, man. This was fun. Hey, I appreciate you, man. This was a fun conversation. Thanks a lot. Good deal. All right, everybody. We're out of here. Good news and good night, I guess. Later.